Welcome, everyone. Good evening. Thanks for joining us today. We're very excited for this session. So, Suraj Moraje is a dynamic business and social sector leader driven by a passion for driving purposeful change in a rapidly morphing world through ethical leadership. Suraj is sought after for his views on topics like megatrends, the strategy to execution journey, and mid-career transitions. And this is where it gets really like daunting. Okay, a gold medalist from NIT Surat and young alumni achiever from IIM Ahmedabad. Suraj is a former senior partner at McKinsey and Company, and the former managing director of India's largest employer, Quest Corp. He is currently building the ACA Fellowship and piloting two business venture ideas. Okay, this might be a little dated, I suppose. In our space, Suraj also, so the ACA Fellowship is related to the counseling and guidance space, and some phenomenal work there. And he is also the founder of Inner Compass Village, which offers a very unique, interesting experiential learning model for high school students. And that is how we all met. And with over 2 decades at McKinsey and Company, he has played key roles in tech-led transformations across Asia and EMEA. Suraj holds an education background from the esteemed IMA, as we mentioned. And so over to you. We're really excited for this topic because, we all know we're living in a very uncertain world, and most of us as parents, as counselors, are still trying to navigate, how we should guide students for this changing, evolving, uncertain world. So over to you, Suraj.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ramya and Sapna, and thank you for everything you guys do. It's always nice to hear somebody else talk about you because it makes you sound fancier than you actually are. It's wonderful to be here today. I think, frankly, less qualified to be here than many of you. I'm not a counselor. I've not studied psychology, and I've not learned about uh, how to get kids through college. But I think over the last 3 or 4 years, I've been working with adolescents across social groups. So I work with underprivileged kids. I work with kids from Indian boards. I work with kids from IGCSE, IB, typically in the 8th standard and above age groups. And I'm a parent. I have one child who's just gone to college and one child who's in the 11th. And I think part of my interest in this topic has come from seeing my two boys grow um, and um, and sort of seeing them shift between various boards. They started off in ICSE, then they went to IB, and now one is doing IGCSE. See the first one go through all the pangs of, how do I build my profile? Where do I do my internship? What do I want to be when I grow up? Um, and so I spent a lot of time thinking about, what do I, as a parent, what do I do with my kids? And how do I guide my kids? And coming out of that, and I have the benefit of having a wife who's a psychologist, and the work we do at ACA, we realize that actually there is, possibly a lot that parents can do more than I thought. And so today, we'll set it up more as a conversation. Please do, if you can't keep your videos open, at least keep your mics open, because otherwise the presentation is simply not going to work. But stop me at any point and really sort of see this as a conversation between parents or educators, people who have a stake in the future of young people, rather than an expert trying to tell you what the answer is. Because frankly, I think none of us knows the answer. So let's start. I'll just see if I can project this. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Cool.
Yes.
You'll have to keep your mics on as we speak, because we will need that. So let's start with a question. Can anybody tell me what's going on here?
Seems like business.
Business. So this is actually this. It is business. You're right, but it depicts a particular event. See, this mics have to be off. Can anybody guess which event this
I'm going to
is?
keep quiet because I know. Because I've attended this whole
Yeah,
session.
you know this one. Yeah, you know this, Sapna. That's an unfair advantage. Anybody else? Anybody want
Not
to?
going to use.
We really can't progress unless somebody guesses, by the way. Like, it's really not going to work. So somebody has to guess. Any
Garima
thoughts?
says it's trade. Garima says it's trade.
Trade. Okay. Yes, it is
Saurabh
trade.
Saurabh
Nanda
says
says it's
Vasco da
Vasco da
Gama.
Gama.
Looks like
Vasco da Gama.
small
Who said
trade.
Vasco da Gama? Sorry, how do I see all those
Saurabh.
answers?
Saurabh Nanda said Vasco da Gama.
Fabulous. This is indeed the picture of Vasco da Gama coming to Calicut. Well done, Saurabh. Saurabh, do you know which year this was?
1498. And I'm also from
1498.
NIT Jalandhar, so fellow NITians here.
Oh, wow. There we go. Yes. So Vasco da Gama coming to India in 1498. The picture is a gross misrepresentation of what happened. It was clearly painted by a European. You can see he makes Indians look like a bunch of junglees with this Indian king. There's a Moran bowing in front of mighty Vasco da Gama, welcoming him to India. In reality, Vasco da Gama waited for days for an audience. But here's the question. In 1498, when Vasco da Gama did come to India, which was India's most populous city? In 1498. Can anybody guess?
Calcutta, was it?
Was not Calcutta, no. It's a good guess, but it wasn't Calcutta. Come on, guys. We have
One of
parents
the
here.
ports,
Set
I
an
guess,
example
no?
for your children.
Bombay?
Bombay, not Bombay. Not one of the ports.
Not one of the ports. Varanasi.
Pondicherry?
Pondicherry, no. Varanasi, no.
Oh God. Is that down south, like Kochi and
Was not Kochi. It was
Kerala?
down south.
Or...
I think you have to give us a hint now.
God, I'm gonna run through the entire seashore line, sea line.
Goa.
It was
He's
not.
saying it's
It
not a
was not on
port.
the port. It was not on the port.
It was not
Hyderabad?
a port. Okay.
Bhuvaneshwar.
Hyderabad.
Bhuvaneshwar, no, no. Not Gujarat. Nowhere in Gujarat, Vikram. Not Calcutta. Not Delhi.
Suraj, maybe you
Not
should
Oh,
give a hint.
yeah. Let's use
It
ChatGPT.
doesn't
Okay.
exist today, right?
It doesn't exist today.
Is that side of where we are towards Pakistan, that Punjab side?
No, it's not. It's still in India.
I'll put it on ChatGPT.
Okay, if you've got that, I'll just give you the answer. So the answer is actually Vijayanagar, Hampi. What is today known as
Ah,
Hampi. Hampi was the
okay.
third most populated city in the world. It was a center of global trade, apparently one of the largest markets for Arabian horses in the world. The second language in Hampi was Persian. This massive, massive center of trade. What happened to Hampi? Does anybody know? What happened to Vijayanagar? Why is it no longer around? Okay, so I'll tell you. So literally 60 years later, 60 years after Vasco da Gama came, Hampi had been fighting with four neighboring states for decades. And these four states ganged up, the Bahmani, the Deccan Sultanates. They ganged up against the Vijayanagar Empire, and they basically defeated the Vijayanagar Empire. And to make sure the Vijayanagar Empire never troubled them again, they basically came with soldiers and with lots and lots of people and systematically destroyed the city. It took them months to destroy the city. The city was so big and the buildings so grand. It took them months to destroy the city. But here we are, India's most populated, glorious city, 60 years later, no longer exists. And 500 years later, none of us can even mention it. Which is the second most populated city in India in 1498? And it's none of the names given so far. I'll give you a clue. It's in Bengal.
Murshidabad.
Not Murshidabad. One more, just one more guess. Anybody? You're on mute. The folks on Vikram Bhaskar's login, you've muted yourself, so I can't hear you. I can see you.
Old.
No, I was just discussing with Aditya, my son. So
Oh,
he
okay,
said
okay,
Calcutta.
okay.
I said somebody has already said this. So
Is
that's
it? See, ChatGPT says it's Gore, someplace.
There you go. Yeah, it's a city called Gouda. You're cheating, Smithy. You got to stop cheating.
Yeah.
Otherwise, your children, otherwise all your students will do the same. It's a town called Gouda. It was actually the capital of Bengal for many many years. Again, no longer really exists because it was on the bank of the river. The river changed its course, and so people abandoned the city. Right. So you've got these. I mean, so why am I sort of talking about Vasco da Gama? I'm talking about Vasco da Gama and 1498 because we all say that the world changes and the world is always changing. The fact is, the world always has been changing. And people say, "Oh my God, it's going so fast." The fact is, the world has never been predictable. Um, 60 years later, imagine if you had lived in Vijayanagar as a young child. By the time you're old, your city no longer exists. It no longer exists. And so if you've built your business, if you've built your life supplying goods into Vijayanagar, suddenly you can't do that anymore. If you had a restaurant in Vijayanagar, suddenly you got to go find another place to build a restaurant. And all these professions existed even then. So the world has always been changing in ways that maybe we don't completely appreciate. Who can tell me who these three ladies are and what are these three ladies doing?
Oh, I saw this in another webinar, so I'll
Okay,
wait. It's
then you
fascinating.
then you can't say.
I won't say.
Any guesses? What
I
are they
think
doing?
it's वो lamps को बुझाते हैं ना इससे it's that
Lamps ko bujhate. That's a good guess actually, but no, it's not.
no,
Guarding. No, they're not guarding.
is there some kind of no that this cannot be cigarette, one will burn the lumps of
Whistleblowers. Interesting. They're not whistleblowers. None of those things is a whistle. We'll take one more guess if anybody wants to try. Any other guesses on what these people could be doing? Watchmen. Close. So it turns out they're calling birds. Nice guess, Sangeeta. So it turns out that these women were practicing a profession called knocker uppers. They were knocker uppers. So according to history, if you go back into history, human beings never had to wake up on time because we'd wake up when the sun came up, go into the field, do whatever we had to do. By the time it became dark, lighting and energy was so expensive. Maybe there'd be one candle burning in the house, have dinner, but then go to sleep quickly because you can't afford to keep light on in the house. And so we woke up and we went to sleep with the sun. When the Industrial Revolution came, suddenly people had to wake up at a particular time to go to work for their shifts. But there was a problem. Alarm clocks hadn't been invented yet. And so you had these ladies, what these ladies are doing is going around waking up people so they can get to their shift on time. And so the ones who are blowing peas out of pea shooters onto windows. One lady's got the where she's tapping windows to wake people up. It was a very, very nuanced. It sounds like a dumb job, but it's a very nuanced job because these women made about three pence a week if you were in the UK. And you couldn't blow too hard. If you blew on somebody's window too hard, A, you might break the window, but B, you might wake up the person next door who then doesn't pay you for waking up services. So it's a loss of revenue, right? And these women had to be on time every day. Whenever I talk to kids about this, they go, "Who would wake them up?" And they were knocker uppers for knocker uppers. So you had people who would stay awake till 2 o'clock, go and wake up knocker uppers, who would then go and wake up people who needed waking up services. Can anybody guess? Actually, everybody. When do you think the last knocker upper went out of business?
When clocks came in, alarm clocks.
Which year was that? I hear 1910s. How many of you think it's after or before? Any other guesses? Not 1910s. When did alarm clocks come in? Still in business at hotels. True. True. When did the last knocker uppers go out of work? Any other guesses? It's not 1910. Come on, surely you can guess. 1980s. Okay, that's a bit late. How many of you were born in the 1980s? Can we see a show of hands? Anybody born in the 70s here? So 1970s actually is when the last knocker-upper went out of work on record. Smriti,
That
1970s.
late.
That late, yeah, we were around. We were around. So you think about it, right? When we were born, they were knocker-uppers at work. And then how many of us have alarm clocks in the house today? Most of us probably don't, right? We have mobile phones. Mobile phones came and took away the alarm clock. And so we went in our lifetime, we've gone in our short lifetime. Most of us are probably in our 40s. Some of our kids here are a little bit younger than 40. But we've gone from having, within one lifetime, having to have people wake us up, to seeing alarm clocks in our house. I can still remember when the first alarm clock came to my house. It was such a curiosity, this marvel of modern sort of science with a battery in it. And like, you turn that thing, that little dial behind, and now they're gone in one lifetime. And that's a little bit the speed at which things move, and things have always moved. I mean, the mobile phone kind of, I can remember, oh, Lopa just bought an alarm clock. Well done. I can see, I can still remember my first mobile phone, my first color TV. I mean, many of us can remember our first thing that since gone. My first fax machine, it's gone. And so the fact is, professions have always been coming and going. And if you look at the professions that are sort of found in the business community today or in the world today, 50% exist 50 years ago. Right? So professions have always been turning over. So imagine 50 years, 50% of professions new, right? So here's just the third thing that I would throw into the mix. Surely you can guess what's happening here. Who's this person? Like, what's going on?
Oldest person in the world, probably.
Oldest person in the world. Fantastic. Can anybody guess her age?
117.
Well done.
Thank you.
170-year-old
A
lady.
very good student.
Just wonder how you figured out 117. So 117-year-old lady celebrating her birthday. Sadly, she passed away. The reason I'm showing this, if you have a child who's, let's say, between 10 and 20, between 0 and 20, there is at least a 50% chance they will live till 100. At least a 50% chance. If you look at how these probabilities have been changing over the years, could be much higher. Could be much higher. So your child is going to, let's assume your child needs to be ready to live till 100. And not just live till 100, but be healthy until they're 95. Many of us probably have elderly parents at 75, 80. My uncle at 75 went and climbed to Everest Base Camp. He was absolutely fine. Ati Priya's grandmother just turned 100. There you go, right? Your grandmother. So imagine your kids. Your kids will turn 100. And they'll be healthy until they're 95. Many of us, hopefully not me, but many of us will be healthy until we're 85, 90. Right? Well into our 70s, we're going to be active. Well into our 80s. And I remember my father retiring in 1993. He was about 50 then. He said, I'm done working. I don't want to work anymore. So 1993 was about 30 years ago, right? Had he been around today, he would have been 80. And when he retired in 1993, he had a house and 10 lakhs in savings. And he thought he was a very rich man. And all of his money was fixed deposits because you got 10% interest in those days. And he lived off his interest like a king. And he passed away many years ago, but I sometimes wonder, had he been around today, 80, which many of us will live to. And I'm sure many people on this call are thinking, I'm going to retire at 50. Had he been around today, what would he have felt about the level of savings that he has? He never used a mobile phone, never saw a mobile phone. He died. Like he saw a mobile phone. I just bought my first one, and sort of when I went to meet him, he was in the hospital. How would he have thought about life 30 years later on the savings that he had kept, thinking he was living like a king? What would he have done? What would he have done for money? Of course, I would have looked after him, but had he had to look after himself, how would he have managed? The truth of our children's lives is they're going to start working when they're 22, and they are going to be active until they're 90, 95. That's a 70-year working career. Just let that sink in for a minute. Those of you who are raising kids who want to be investment bankers, or who want to be doctors, or who want to be dancers, they're going to start dancing at 22, start investment banking at 22, and are they really going to dance until they're 90? Or be surgeons until they're 90 for 70 years? Most of us spend 20 years in one profession and we're fed up. Imagine 3.5 times, 4 times that amount of time is the amount of time our kids are going to spend in the workforce. They're not going to be able to retire. Most of them will not be able to afford it. But most of us can throw away our plans of retiring at 50 because we can't afford it either. Is the truth of it, right? We're just in a very, very new reality. So the world has always been changing. 60 years is a very long time. 60 years is also a long time for professions to change. Can you imagine someone becoming a banker today and then suddenly, like in 20 years from now, what technology is going to exist? What jobs are going to exist? Really, are they going to be bankers 20 years from now? Or will our machines be talking to their machines? So how do you plan? How do you plan in this environment? How do you bring up a kid in this environment? And the truth is, most of us, when we talk to our kids as parents, as counselors, as teachers, talk to our kids about which subjects they like, as if those subjects are going to be relevant to them for the rest of their lives, and talk to them about what they want to be, as if any of us has a clue as to what options are going to exist. And when I talk to kids, I find, especially, by the way, kids from wealthy backgrounds, and I'm assuming many people here are from well-off backgrounds, have been so fixated on you've got to figure out what career you want to. Like, if you don't know what you're going to do, you should feel like you're just odd. And when I talk to kids, I say, if you know what you're going to do, if you really, really know what you want to do, you're fooling yourself. Because the truth is, you can't. You can't know what you want to do in a world that's changing this quickly. And if you look at the changes, and this is a talk I really enjoy giving from time to time. These are just, there's just 9 things I love to talk about. One is the world is rebalancing. I mean, just 2 weeks ago, who would have imagined Donald Trump going and sort of saying the G2 are meeting? I mean, really? So the US now thinks China is its equal? By the way, what we're seeing post-colonization, if you take a distribution of world GDP from 0 AD to 2000 AD, you'll see around 0 AD, India and China was 70% of world GDP. By 1947, which is 1950, at the end of World War II, the height of colonization, we were less than 10%, 15% of GDP. And now it's growing back. So this rebalancing of the world's center of economic gravity to Asia is a real thing. What's it going to look like next year? Not very different. What's it going to look like in 30 years? Jesus, it could look really different. And in 50 years, you might find India and China 60, 70% of the world's GDP again. And we're bringing up kids who need to live in that environment. And here we are, most of us shipping our kids out to the US or Europe, thinking that's where opportunity is. I think keeping that shift in mind is so important. The next large mega cities are going to come not in Asia, not in Europe, but in Africa. How many of us have thought of sending our kids to Africa to say, listen, go understand Nigeria, or go understand South Africa, go understand Zambia. Lusaka in Zambia is going to be amongst the top 10 cities in the world in 50 years, given the way that population is evolving. The second point I talk a lot about is, economists, when the Berlin Wall fell, declared the end of history is here. That's it. Human struggle is over. liberal democracy has won. From now on, there's going to be one power, that's the US. There's going to be one philosophy, that's democracy with globalization and capitalism. The end of strife. That was in the 90s. And the last 30 years, we've all, as a generation, the parents around this call have all benefited from the end of history. Because standards, everything, all standards have sort of converged. Today, all phones in the world use USB-C. Those who remember the first phone chargers, remember it was so expensive to go and buy a phone charger because every phone had a different interface. You had to figure out which interface works with what. Today, all laptops have USB-Cs. Laptop chargers used to be such a big deal. Today, you leave your charger at home, just go buy a USB-C charger and you're done, right? So the whole sort of standardization of technology has collapsed costs. We've benefited from all of that. As a generation, we've been brought up to believe you go anywhere in the world, you'll settle there. It's okay. They will accept you, you will add value, you will settle, you'll get a passport. Life is great. Not true anymore. The end of history has ended. And our kids are going to live at least the next 10, 20 years in a very, very, very different environment, which is again multipolar, which is again going to see standards growing, standards coming, multiple standards emerging. I think there's going to be a space race. India is going to be a part of the space race. I was at a space consortium discussion 2 weeks ago, and it is absolutely inspiring the kinds of satellites that even college kids in India are putting into space now. It's not difficult. They know how to do it. There's going to be a lot more IP creation in places like India and the East. And there's going to be a complete change in how global identities and alliances are formed. Given this, I think that there's 4 trends I see in India. One, what I call the rise of urban India. Urbanization is slowing. India's agricultural workforce has actually been growing for the last 5-7 years after decades of collapsing. And that's because, frankly, our cities have become cesspits. Nobody wants to come and work in a city anymore for a salary like 15,000-20,000 rupees when they can get welfare benefits at home. They don't live well, but at least they don't live in a slum. And so I think there's a whole resurgence going on of rural India. It's not Bharat, it's not all of those cliches that I keep hearing about, but it's just people choosing to stay back in their villages. 85% of India has never left its home district. And that is going to continue. I think India is one of those countries which I think is going to just see urbanization stall because we're just doing so poorly at building cities. India's silver rush, so everyone talks about young India. India's population is going to stop growing in the next 15-20 years. So by the time your kid is in their 30s, we're actually going to be an aging society. And an aging society operates very, very differently with a very different set of opportunities from a young society. Japan sells more adult diapers than baby diapers today. Right? So the way consumer economy works will change, the way healthcare works will change. And you combine that with number 5, which is agriculture. 80% of our farmers are prone to climate change. And so where we plant, how we plant, we can no longer rely on monsoons to fund our agriculture. And we've seen this the last 3 years. The monsoons have stayed too long. They've retreated too late and too heavily, destroyed wheat crops. Anything that's monsoon fed is increasingly at risk of being destroyed. And so agricultural practices in India, I believe in the next 20 years are going to go through a complete change, requiring capex, technology, training, bunch of things that are very different. Health is truly wealth. And what I mean is that, I don't know if can anybody tell me which was India's top selling drug last month? India, the emerging market, which our top selling drug was by revenue? Any guesses?
Was it that
And
anti-weight thing?
yeah, anti-obesity drug.
Anti-obesity, Monjaro.
Yeah.
Monjaro, yeah.
Monjaro beat ampicillin as
Amoxicillin, sorry, Augmentin. It beat
to become
Ozempic.
number 1.
Ozempic.
So Ozempic, I think in that form hasn't been launched. It's Eli Lilly's Monjaro. I think the other one is coming.
Monjaro, yes.
These are GLP-1s, but you know how much they cost? About 25,000 rupees a month. That's about the same as a down payment, as an EMI on a car. And that's the number one drug in India. So people want to feel like they're doing healthy stuff. I want to take Monjaro so that if I do Monjaro for a month and lose 10 kgs, I can then eat samosas for the following month and feel good about myself. It's a very shallow movement. Most of this is not about becoming healthy. It's about feeling like I'm doing things to become healthy. But we have the largest population of obese people in the world, the largest population of people with BP, diabetes. So really sort of this whole health push and just helping people become healthy. I tell you, if your child is a gym instructor, they're in the money. They're in the money. If they're doing things around holistic wellness, they're in the money. 7 is a little bit more conceptual, but I think, if you look at the world and how the world evolved over the last 50, 100 years, the dollar became the de facto standard just before World War II. Everybody trusted the dollar. The last 20 years, all central banks have been buying gold to the extent that now 17% of all gold held in the world is held by central banks. If central banks no longer trust the dollar and fiat currency, like what are humans going to do? What are the rest of us going to do? And we're already seeing, therefore, gold prices go up to astronomical levels. I was doing the maths today. US and China, the governments together own about 3% of all Bitcoin in the world, confiscated from criminals and hoarded by the government. We're all seeing inflation. Inflation is a product of basically governments taking on too much debt. US debt today is, as a percent of GDP, is about the same level as it was in World War II. That's crisis level debt. And it's not dissimilar for many other economies. So we will see more inflation. People are going to lose faith in keeping money for certain. I'm sure most of us don't keep money in fixed deposits anymore. Equity is going to become dicey. More and more of us are going to buy land, gold, Bitcoin, and just look for things that are going to not lose value as inflation comes. So I think points 3 to 7 to my mind are just to say the opportunities going forward are very different from the opportunities in the past. Now you will ask, what about technology? Should our kids become engineers? A lot of kids talk to me about, should I become a computer engineer? And I think one of the learnings there has been that, so for many years, there was this law called Moore's law, which basically said that semiconductors become twice as powerful every 2 years. And you could sort of almost set your clock by it, right? You knew that every 2 years there's going to come a processor which is twice as powerful as the previous processor. AI is developing at 4 times this pace. It becomes twice as powerful every 6 months. Now, those of us who remember Netscape, the browser, WordPerfect, the word processor, Lotus 123, maybe some of us first learned to use a spreadsheet with Lotus 123. Maybe those of you who in the US have shopped on Zappos at some point in time. These were all people who were trying to pioneer apps or pioneer the use of technology, and they all lost because the power of the platform just subsumed all the apps. And no one knows how powerful these platforms are going to be. So at the end, unless you are really a lover of technology, really a geek who loves to code at a level which is, combined with maths, physics, what have you, really sort of deep into technology, the chances are you should not be thinking of computer science as... Today, computer science has become a language, just like English or French. Computer science it's a language people speak. And all of our kids need to be able to speak that language. But the fact is, they're probably better off. You're probably better off being a law firm today that's able to use AI to do stuff more productively than to try and create a new AI that lawyers can use. Because whatever AI you create, chances are the platform at some point, ChatGPT is going to eat it up. So really how we think about technology, for many, many years, technology in India became a default way of creating a profession. And there's a real question now to say, does technology go for most of us to just becoming a language we speak? The final point I want to make, and this is what took me towards ECA, is that we've all heard this: inequality is growing. The World Economic Forum says it takes 7 generations for an Indian with low income to become average income. 7 generations today. And the fact is, as a society, we've become decoupled. Most middle class, upper middle class people, like if you Google what is a public service, if you ask the internet, it will tell you water, electricity, sewage services, public transport. All four of these things, none of us use anymore. None of us rely on the government for anymore. We don't rely on the government for security either. We love airports. Thankfully, the government has fixed our airports, so we use the airport. So the only pain point for most of us left in this world is we have to use these damn roads, and these roads are awful. When's the government going to fix the roads? The good news is there'll be flying cars in the next 10 years or 15 years, and we no longer have to interface with common people using the roads either. We'll just buy flying cars and we'll be fine. In Atlas Shrugged, the whole conversation about John Galt was how the wealthy just went away and created their own society. We didn't have to go away. We stayed right here and created our own society. And there's a real question about at which point this disconnect starts to destabilize society and gets us so out of touch with what's going on. But we also don't use schools. We don't use healthcare. It's the other two things that in the West people rely on the government for. And I think that this is what I call a social debt. We have a social debt. And if we want to live in the society for the next 50, 70, 80, 100 years, we need to find a way to get the rest of the country to be at the same level as us. Or else, we start reaching levels where pitchforks come out. Today, our social contract seems to be, we will pay taxes to the government as long as the government ensures nobody comes and kills me. They can scratch my car, that's fine. But nobody can touch me. But that contract is deteriorating. 5 years ago, it was a stronger contract, what people could or couldn't do. The fact is that the arm of the law is becoming more and more tenuous when it comes to defending the upper classes. And so the social debt is something that I think a lot about when I think about my children, what my children are going to do and where they're going to live, how they're going to live. So the world is changing in multiple ways. I think that there are huge opportunities. At the same time, I think as parents, it's important for us to take a look at the long term and tell our children, help them understand how the world is changing. The unfortunate truth is that for those who've sent our kids, many of our kids' schools are just programmed to send them to the US. Frankly, our entire counselor system loves the US because that is the most complicated application process with the most uncertain outcomes where you are most likely to want to use a counselor. And I'm sure there's many counselors here. I apologize. I don't mean to be offensive, but the truth is that we've got a lot of the counselors out there are just very, very commercial about this because frankly, that's the best way. IB as a system, I think, it's a great curriculum, but the fact is that my kid who went to ICSE also learned a lot. So are we able to look beyond some of the tropes that are thrown at us? I don't know how many of you know this, but the US education system, and by the way, I think it's a wonderful education system. I'm not against the US education system, but it spends $6 billion. American universities spend $6 billion on advertising every year. That is the same budget as Nike. So the US education system spends as much as Nike on creating a good impression of itself. Obviously, we think it's a great system. Obviously, we think it's the best system in the world because no other system has a marketing budget. $6 billion is twice the budget of the central government of India's education budget. To put it in perspective, right? So the world is changing. I think it's important for us as parents and for kids to kind of become aware of some of these trends and say, okay, how is this going to play out? How could it play out? How do I create options for myself while at the same time making sure I understand the risks I'm taking? And by the way, I think the biggest problem here is once you pass 40, your risk appetite comes down dramatically. And Sapna and I discussed this when we met last, because she's got this great thing to say, my kids will go and figure it out. I feel different. I want to protect my kids and make sure I land them correctly and make sure they avoid risk. And most of us are like that. We want to avoid risk for our kids. And we think we're de-risking them by sending them off to some country where we think they'll settle. But if you look at this, there are many other factors at play. So in this context, what do we do? What do we do as parents? And I think that, first of all, if I look at the future, I think that and anybody who predicts the future is prone to get 50% wrong. The problem is you don't know which 50% is wrong upfront. So good luck to you on figuring this out. But I think that there are a few things that I think are important. One, I think that bureaucracy related skills will for sure be phased out. I personally foresee an MBA being less valuable in 5 years than it is today. The value of middle management, I think the most difficult age to find a job today is in your late 40s, early 50s, because you don't need as many people just to manage people who manage people who then go and manage people who manage people who then go and do something. And so bringing up our kids to be able to just communicate, to do, for example, business administration, like from the get-go, I'm not sure that's going to be a useful skill anymore, unless you have something deep, something deep. Two, the world is no longer flat. The world is curved, it's fragmented, which means there'll be a lot more technology work happening. I think manufacturing will have to kind of come back in India simply because we don't have enough engineers in India doing mechanical engineering, electrical engineering. I'm actually thinking of opening a food processing plant because we just don't have enough food processing in the country. It seems like a great opportunity. It's so unsexy, but it seems like such a great opportunity because the demand is so huge for stuff like that. It is impossible to have one career. It is impossible our kids will not have a single identity, a work identity. They will not be engineers or doctors. They might be both. They will almost certainly run hobbies in parallel with their work because work is going to end up being very different. They will think very differently about accumulation of wealth. They will not accumulate wealth till they're 50 and then spend it until they're 70 and then hope to die. Right? They will have to keep managing their wealth and earning in parallel. So the way a career is structured needs to change. I think that the Luddites, and again, I think parents, teachers, students are going to become redundant. And this is a big dilemma for parents, right? Because on the one hand, we don't want our kids to be on social media all the time. On the other hand, the fact is that's where the action is today. If your child is not on social media, they're not learning to socialize on social media. They may never actually make friends because that's how today it seems like my kids make the best friends. It's like my kids they come home, my older son would come home, go and play shooting games online, these kind of real-time shooting games, and get to know kids from his school because they would team up while playing those games. And so all of his friends who he's kept in touch with after going to college are kids who he's played video games online with, while also going to school with them, but he did not make friends with them at school. So the way these things are happening are changing dramatically. I think schools that ban kids from using AI are doing kids a disservice. They're doing a real disservice. Children need to learn to use AI AI for the right things. I've been sharing prompts with my kids on, for example, my older son was struggling with my younger son was struggling with probability in the 11th standard. So we created a prompt where we got Gemini to basically look at his syllabus and frame 20 questions on probability, cutting across different aspects of probability as a subject. And then at the end of it, to tell him, here are the 2 or 3 concepts you're struggling with in probability that maybe you need to go and do better. He found it very, very valuable. There's a lot of people today who are using AI to make reports and send to other people who are using AI to kind of reduce those reports. There's this meme I saw where this person says, Gemini, please take these 5 points and convert them to a 15-page report. Sends it to his boss, and the boss says, Gemini, please take this report and convert to 5 points. Right? And a lot of that stuff is still happening in schools. Our schools are asking people to submit reports which are meaningless. In the age of AI, many of those skills are meaningless. So, I think we got to get kids to use technology, to understand technology. Teachers have to use technology to set papers. There is no reason why you would give 30 kids in a class the same paper today. I would strongly challenge that notion. If all of these kids are taking maths, Why would you give them all the same paper? Some are capable of solving tougher questions. Let them understand what tougher questions look like. Some maybe need simpler questions. You know that they're going to get C's, and that's okay, but let them at least get a paper which grades them. So teachers. The fifth point is one that I worry about the most. I'm not yet 50. I like to say mid-40s. My wife likes to remind me I'm turning 50 in January. But already I find that I'm tempted to not be curious. When I meet a young person who talks about something, I'm tempted to go, yeah, okay, I know what you're talking about. But actually, I don't. I've become lazy. I've become an intellectual sumo wrestler. Then our kids are going to have to learn till they're 70, 75, 80. And by the way, learning is not, it's not using AI to write a topic, to write an essay that you have to submit on a topic you can't understand. And that's part of the problem that I see happening, which is kids are just learning to bullshit their way through life from the age of 15. But that's what we learned in business school, right? We actually learned other stuff before that. And so how do we get kids to really be curious about details, to be curious about the world around them, and to build the stamina to keep learning? And then the final point, I spoke about the social debt, but I think that in a world where we live longer, we just need more friends. We need people around us who we trust, who we can go to. There's no one midlife crisis. I'm reading a book right now where this kid talks about his 1/3 life crisis, because he's going to have a 2/3 life crisis a few years later, right? We're going to have multiple crises in our lives, and we're going to need a lot of help to get through it. So how do we stay rooted, and how do we have kids stay rooted in community? I look at my own life. My first 13 years in Africa, came to India, 2 schools, college for 4 years, business school for 2 years, McKinsey, 5 years in 4 different countries, came back. I'm like, what have I done with my life? All of my friends are all over the world. I never get to talk to them. Frankly, they're all engaging with people who are in their immediate circle. That is human nature. Where have I built network? Where have I, and not networks in terms of people who are going to give me business opportunities. Who is that person who I can go visit on a Sunday afternoon without having to call and ask if they're free? Who's the person who I can just go up, just drop in their house on Wednesday night and say, I had a shitty day at work today. And it's not, those of us who are married know it's not always our spouses. It is sometimes, but often it's not. Often it can't be. And so, figuring out what community means. In India, we've gotten so used to being economic migrants, and we've grown unrooted, rootless, I would say. So I think these changes to my mind appear inevitable. One man's jaundiced view on what parents can do. I think first of all, I feel that as a generation, we have over pivoted to rote learning is bad. Our kids should understand and apply. I think rote learning is such an important part of education. I was sitting the other day and talking to, I'm trying to remember what it was. Yeah, so a VC had called me and they'd invested in this company and they had asked me, can you come and just coach them? And I sat with the founder and I was like, okay, let's talk about your revenues, and ask him how many subscribers he has. And he said, these are my revenues, these are my subscribers, this is my revenue per user. And I asked him, so if you multiply, I kind of did the mental math and said, it doesn't make sense because of this, this, and this. And the guy couldn't answer. And then I kind of asked him 3 more questions and he couldn't do maths on his feet. It doesn't matter if you can do maths in a calculator. The fact is, in real life, many parts of real life, we have to think on our feet. We have to be able to remember what was my profit last year? What were my marks in college? Like, that's memory. We've got to be able to memorize. And writing is never going to go out of style. Because unless you want to sound like ChatGPT, you better learn to have your own better style of writing. So I think that memorizing tables, getting kids to actually learn that, some subjects are boring and life sucks. You got to do them. Everything is not choice. That's such an important life skill, right? Such an important life skill. I was so happy that my older son did ICSE because he got to do Indian history, Indian geography. He hated both of them. And I was like, yes, He's learned to mug up names and dates that he's never going to use in his life, but he's built that skill. And I think that's a skill. I don't want to overstate, like, of course, it's important to be able to apply, but in my experience, most of us parents who are educated teach our kids to think anyway. We teach, I mean, our kids learn to think critically. Kids learn to ask questions because we don't slap them every time they ask us a question. So they learn to be curious. A lot of that stuff comes more naturally. What we're unable to teach our kids is rigor. Because that's just boring to teach, and we don't have the rigor to teach our kids the rigor. So that's the first. The second I would say is we need to embrace technology. And it's a debate we're always having at home, not always a happy debate. It sometimes ends with a lot of door slamming. But figuring out, how much video games can a kid play? Maybe they should play more than we think they should play. Maybe it's okay. What do we let them, what tasks can we give them to use with AI? How can we get them to do stuff like book tickets and do stuff online that's actually useful so they understand the use of all that? Can we get them to sell stuff online? That's a great way to use the internet, right? You can reach out to so many things. So how do we embrace technology rather than saying, no, kids below 16 shouldn't? And I understand, I totally believe there are social evils out there. And we've got to kind of do that. But so that's the second. The third is getting kids to do real things. And unfortunately, our education systems in general have not evolved into getting kids to do real things. Our education system is still built to build clerks for the British East India Company, where the real thing is to read and write, to copy a ledger from one thing to another, while making sure it's still legible without making careless mistakes. That's what was important in the days before photocopiers, and that's still largely what our education system is doing. Although in the case of some of the international curriculum, is also teaching them to be MBAs before their time. Kids do not get to do real things. They get to do demos, they get to write tests, but we don't get our kids to build cars. We don't get our kids to go and sell stuff on the road. We don't get our kids to launch marketing campaigns. Frankly, that would be such an important part to my view, at least my experience. And this is what we would do at Inner Compass camps, is just get kids to try their hand, 2 hours, 3 hours, go and do something real and see if you like it. Because at the end, success is 10% subject. It's 90% other stuff. And the other stuff is, do I like building stuff with my hands? Do I like analyzing sort of data and finding solutions? Do I like applying creativity to problems? By the way, this is one of the biggest things that I find. A lot of kids think they're not creative because they can't do art. And they have never been put in a situation where they can actually apply creativity without being artistic. Find solutions to problems, right? That's creativity. And so I've had a lot. In fact, that's one of the biggest learnings we've had coming out of Inner Compass programs for kids. Many of the kids will come out and say, I didn't realize I was creative, or that I enjoy creativity. Because for them, creativity is art class. Right? Do I enjoy helping people and working with people? We push kids to be leaders. We push kids to stand for elections. We don't get them to think enough as to whether they actually like working with people. And by the way, not everybody does. My firstborn thinks everybody else is stupid. I'm not going to do teamwork with stupid people, with like cretins who have less intelligence than me. And I'm like, that's fine. At least you know. Right? They're not all cretins, and someday you'll figure it out, but at least you know what you like. And we're not pushing him to be a team player, to go help the world. He's like, it's fine. It's just what it is, right? Hustling. Not all kids can hustle, and some kids can hustle really, really, really well. When we get kids to go and sell, in fact, selling is one of the things that I wish all kids would get to do at school, because kids learn so much about themselves when they go and sell. And you always surprised which kids love it and which kids hate it. You'll get these really quiet children who you think would not even have the courage to kind of talk to a stranger, who suddenly become these monsters, and they find this excitement and just kind of connecting with a person, and all this power of having sold something. I convinced that person to do something. Kids learn a lot about themselves when they sell, when they hustle. And finally, managing, right? Do I like process? Do I like organizing things? Do I like watching whether your kid likes keeping their room organized is interesting. how do they keep their pencils on their desk? And finally, I think, we have to first apply all this to ourselves, right? Because all of us have been successful by applying a set of rules which worked in a flat world. And we end up assuming that these rules are going to work for our kids. And I think that is the biggest disservice we can do for our kids. So that's all I had to present. Let me stop sharing. Everyone